The morning sun rose over New Montana like it had done for the past 7 years since humans first settled the colony. Commander Marcus Bennett stood at the observation window of the UEN Defiant, watching the golden light spread across the farmlands below. The colony stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction, with wheat fields, vegetable farms, and livestock ranches creating a patchwork of greens and golds across the valley. The sight never failed to move him. After 15 years in the United Earth Navy, Marcus had seen dozens of worlds, but New Montana held a special place in his heart. It looked peaceful. It looked like the future humanity had always dreamed about. It looked like home. Marcus had been patrolling this sector for 3 years now, and he knew every asteroid, every trading route, and every colonist settlement by heart. The Defiant was not a warship in the traditional sense. She was a patrol vessel, designed to respond to emergencies, assist cargo ships having trouble, and maintain a visible presence in the outer rim territories where Earth's authority was more symbolic than real. Her crew of 85 men and women were trained for rescue operations, disaster response, and first contact protocols. They had never fired their weapons in anger, and Marcus had hoped with everything in him to keep it that way. War was something that happened in history books, not in the modern age of exploration and cooperation. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez entered the bridge, carrying 2 cups of coffee in her hands. She handed one to Marcus with a smile and took her position at the tactical station with the practiced ease of someone who had done the same thing 1,000 times before. Amy was 28 years old, sharp as a plasma cutter, and the best tactical officer Marcus had ever worked with in his entire career. She had joined the United Earth Navy straight out of the academy 5 years ago, driven by a burning desire to explore the stars and protect those who ventured into the unknown reaches of space. Her parents had been colonists on one of the first settlements beyond Saul, and she had grown up knowing both the wonder and the danger of frontier life. "Another quiet morning, sir," Amy said, taking a careful sip of her steaming coffee. "The scanners show nothing unusual anywhere in the system. The supply convoy from Earth is due to arrive in about 6 hours, right on schedule. All the colonists are already getting excited about it." Marcus nodded, feeling the tension he had not realized he was carrying ease slightly from his shoulders. "Good news. The colonists will be very happy to get fresh supplies. Some of them have been complaining about the food synthesizers again. How is Dr. Hayes doing with his endless research projects?" Amy's face lit up with genuine amusement. "Still as excited about every rock and plant he finds as he was on his first day here. He was up until 3 in the morning studying some kind of glowing moss he collected from the southern continent. He says it might have revolutionary medical applications, something about the way it produces certain proteins. He showed me the data, and I have to admit, even I got a little excited about it." Dr. Kenneth Hayes was the civilian xenobiologist assigned to the Defiant for the duration of their patrol assignment. He was a thin man in his 50s with wild gray hair that refused to be tamed, thick glasses that were always slightly crooked, and an endless enthusiasm for discovering new forms of life that bordered on childlike wonder. Marcus had grown genuinely fond of the doctor during their 3 years together. Kenneth represented the absolute best of what humanity brought to the stars: insatiable curiosity, unshakable hope, and the sincere desire to understand rather than conquer. He reminded Marcus why they were all out here in the first place. The bridge remained quiet and peaceful for the next few hours. Marcus reviewed supply reports, maintenance schedules, and personnel evaluations with the methodical care of a commander who took his responsibilities seriously. Amy monitored the long-range sensors, tracking the movements of cargo ships, mining vessels, and the occasional explorer craft that passed through their sector. The rest of the crew went about their daily duties with the comfortable efficiency that came from working together for years. It was routine, comfortable, and exactly what Marcus had signed up for when he joined the Navy 15 years ago as a wide-eyed recruit who wanted to see the galaxy. At precisely noon station time, the communication console beeped with an incoming transmission. Ensign Peter Walsh, the young communications officer who had joined them just 6 months ago, looked up from his station with a puzzled expression crossing his face. "Sir, I am receiving a priority message from Earth Command. It is marked urgent and encrypted with the highest level security protocols. I have never seen anything like this before." Marcus felt something cold settle in the pit of his stomach, an instinct honed over years of command that warned him when something was seriously wrong. "Put it through to my ready room immediately. Amy, you have the bridge while I am gone. Keep monitoring everything. If anything changes, anything at all, I want to know about it instantly." In the small office adjacent to the bridge, Marcus activated the secure channel with his command codes. The face of Admiral Patricia Green appeared on the screen within seconds. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and new lines of stress Marcus had never seen before. There was something in her expression that made Marcus's stomach tighten with dread. He had known Patricia for 10 years, had served under her command on 2 different assignments, and he had never seen her look this worried. "Commander Bennett," she said without any preamble or small talk, her voice tight and controlled. "I am sending you classified intelligence that just reached Earth Command less than 4 hours ago. The Zalthar Dominion has issued an ultimatum to all human colonies, every single settlement we have beyond the Sol system. This is not a diplomatic suggestion. This is a direct threat backed by military force." Marcus felt his blood run cold in his veins. The Zalthar Dominion was the most powerful empire in all of known space, a fact that no one disputed. They had conquered 47 different intelligent species over the past 2 standard centuries, building a massive empire that stretched across more than a quarter of the explored galaxy. Their military was legendary for its ruthless efficiency, their technology was generations ahead of most other species, and their approach to diplomacy was simple: submit or be destroyed. Humanity had only encountered them twice before in formal diplomatic settings, both times brief exchanges that had been tense but ultimately peaceful. The Zalthar had seemed content to ignore humanity as beneath their notice. Until now. "What kind of ultimatum are we talking about, Admiral?" Marcus asked, dreading the answer he knew was coming. Patricia's jaw tightened, muscles working under her skin. "They are demanding that we abandon all human colonies beyond the Sol system within exactly 30 standard days. Every man, woman, and child must return to Earth or the inner planets. They claim we are encroaching on territory that belongs to them by ancient right of conquest, that we are expanding into regions they have marked for future development. They are saying our very presence in the Outer Rim is an insult to their authority and a violation of what they call the natural order of the galaxy." "That is completely insane," Marcus said, his voice rising despite his efforts to stay calm. "New Montana is nowhere near Zalthar space. We checked all the territorial claims before we established the colony. We followed every single protocol, consulted every database, made absolutely sure we were not stepping on anyone's territory. The nearest Zalthar outpost is more than 50 light-years away from here. How can they possibly claim this is their space?" "I know all of that," Patricia said, her voice heavy with frustration. "I was at the meeting where the colony sites were approved. We were meticulous. But the Zalthar do not care about our maps or our protocols. Director Vincent Carter at the Diplomatic Corps is trying to negotiate with them right now, doing everything he can to find a peaceful solution. But Ambassador Krell, their representative, is not interested in discussion or compromise. He told our people in the clearest possible terms that humanity is a primitive species that does not understand its place in the galactic order. He said we are children playing with toys we do not comprehend, and that it is time for the adults to teach us proper behavior." Marcus felt rage building in his chest, hot and fierce. "What are our orders from Earth Command? For now, maintain your regular patrol schedule and try to act like everything is normal. We are hoping desperately that this is just a bluff, some kind of political posturing by the Zalthar to intimidate us into giving them something they actually want. But I need you to be absolutely ready for anything, Marcus. If things go wrong, if the situation deteriorates, your ship may be the only thing standing between those 12,000 colonists and whatever the Zalthar decide to do. I am authorizing you to take any and all measures necessary to protect civilian lives." "Understood completely, Admiral. We will be ready for anything." The transmission ended with a soft beep, and Marcus sat in silence in his small office for a long moment, staring at the blank screen. His mind raced through possibilities, scenarios, and contingencies. He had heard stories about the Zalthar over the years, whispered tales from traders who had visited their space, from explorers who had seen the aftermath of their conquests, from diplomats who had negotiated with their officials. They were ruthless, efficient, and absolutely convinced of their superiority over every other species in the galaxy. They did not negotiate with species they considered inferior. They gave orders and expected instant, complete obedience. Those who refused were crushed without mercy or hesitation. Marcus stood up slowly, straightened his uniform, and returned to the bridge with measured steps. He called his senior officers to an immediate meeting in the conference room. Besides Amy, there was Lieutenant Gary Fisher, the chief engineer who kept the aging Defiant running through skill and determination, and Lieutenant Commander Helen Morris, who served as both first officer and primary liaison to the colonial government below. He briefed them on the situation with careful precision, leaving nothing out, watching their faces shift from initial disbelief to growing anger to grim determination. They were good officers, every one of them, and they understood what this meant. "Can we actually evacuate the entire colony if we absolutely need to?" Helen asked. She was a practical woman in her early 40s, a former cargo pilot who had seen more of the galaxy than most admirals, who had hauled supplies to frontier worlds and rescue operations through hostile space. She did not waste time on panic or denial. She focused on what could be done. Not quickly enough to matter, Marcus admitted, hating the words even as he spoke them. New Montana has 12,000 colonists spread across 3 major settlements and dozens of small farms. The Defiant can carry maybe 300 people in an absolute emergency if we pack them in like cargo and ignore every safety regulation. The supply convoy that is coming today has room for another 500 at most. We would need weeks to evacuate everyone, maybe even months, and we would need dozens of ships working around the clock. We do not have that kind of time or resources. Then we need to hope with everything we have that the Zalthar are bluffing, that this is all just political theater, Gary said. The engineer was a stocky man with permanently grease-stained hands and a gift for keeping machinery running even when it should have fallen apart years ago. He had served on the Defiant for 6 years, longer than anyone except Marcus himself. "Hope is not a strategy, and we all know it," Amy said quietly, her tactical mind already working through the possibilities. "Sir, I strongly recommend we bring the entire crew to a higher state of readiness starting immediately. If the Zalthar show up in this system, we need to be able to respond within seconds, not minutes. We need to run battle drills, check every system twice, and make sure everyone knows exactly what to do." Marcus nodded firmly, agreed completely. "Amy, work closely with Gary to make absolutely sure all our systems are running at peak efficiency. I want diagnostics on everything, from the main engines down to the backup life support. Helen, coordinate with Captain Helen Morris down on New Montana. I want detailed emergency evacuation plans ready, even if we cannot move everyone. At least we can save some of them if the worst happens. Focus on children and pregnant women first, then the elderly, then anyone with critical skills we would need to rebuild somewhere else." Over the next week, a tension hung over New Montana like a dark storm cloud that refused to break. The colonists went about their daily work, tending their crops and raising their families, but there was an undercurrent of fear that no one could quite shake. Many of them had left Earth specifically to escape crowding, poverty, and the conflicts that still plagued parts of the home world. They had come to the outer rim to build something new, something peaceful, something better. The idea that war and violence might follow them here, might destroy everything they had worked so hard to create, was almost too much for some of them to bear. Marcus spent long hours on the bridge, watching the sensor displays, waiting for something that he hoped desperately would never come. Amy drilled the crew on emergency procedures and combat protocols until they could respond to any possible situation in their sleep. Gary performed what could only be described as miracles, keeping the Defiant's aging systems online and operational, replacing worn components, rerouting power systems, and coaxing every last bit of performance from equipment that was past its rated lifetime. Helen worked closely with Captain Helen Morris, the colonial administrator, to identify which colonists would be evacuated first if it came to that terrible choice. On the 8th day after the initial warning, Director Vincent Carter appeared on every communication screen across all of human space. His face was drawn and haggard, his voice heavy with resignation and barely controlled anger. Marcus watched the broadcast on the bridge, his crew gathered around him in tense silence. "My fellow humans," Vincent began, the weight of failure evident in every word. "I regret to inform you that all negotiations with the Zalthar Dominion have completely failed. Ambassador Krell has refused every single compromise we offered, every attempt at peaceful resolution that we proposed. The Zalthar have given us exactly 22 days remaining to comply fully with their ultimatum. They have stated in absolutely clear terms that any human presence beyond the Sol system after that deadline will be considered an open act of war and will be met with immediate and overwhelming military force." Vincent paused, and Marcus could see the weight of an entire species on the man's shoulders, crushing him. "Earth's government is meeting in emergency session right now to determine our official response. We are reaching out to other spacefaring species, hoping desperately to build a coalition that can pressure the Zalthar to reconsider their position. But I must be completely honest with you all, and you deserve nothing less than the truth. Most species in known space are absolutely terrified of the Dominion. They will not risk their own safety and survival to protect us. We are alone in this." The transmission ended with a soft chime, and Marcus looked around the bridge at his crew. They sat in stunned silence, processing what they had just heard. "What do we do now, sir?" Peter asked. The young ensign looked genuinely scared, and Marcus could not blame him one bit. Peter had joined the Navy to see the stars, to be part of something bigger than himself. He had not signed up for war. "We do our job exactly as we always have," Marcus said firmly, putting every ounce of command authority he possessed into his voice. "We protect the people on New Montana for as long as we possibly can. We prepare for every contingency. And we hope that Earth finds a way to stop this before it goes any further. But most importantly, we do not give up. We do not surrender, and we do not abandon the people depending on us. But hope, as Marcus had learned over 15 years of service, was in desperately short supply when facing an empire that had conquered 47 species. 12 days after the initial warning, on what had started as a perfectly ordinary morning, the Zalthar arrived. Marcus was in his small quarters, trying desperately to sleep despite the anxiety gnawing at his mind, when the alarm blared through the ship with deafening urgency. He was on the bridge in less than 30 seconds, still pulling on his uniform jacket as he ran through the corridors. "Report immediately," he barked as he took his command chair. Amy's face was pale, drained of all color. "Sir, we have multiple contacts emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the star system. Configuration matches known Zalthar warship designs exactly. I count 15 vessels total, including at least 3 heavy cruisers of the Dominator class. They are moving into attack formation. This is not a patrol. This is an invasion force." Marcus felt his heart sink into his stomach like a stone dropping into dark water. 15 ships. The Defiant would be incredibly lucky to survive a straight fight with even one of them. "Hail them immediately on all frequencies," he ordered, already knowing it was futile. "And get me an emergency channel to New Montana. We need to start evacuations right now, this very second." Peter worked frantically at his console, his young fingers flying across the controls. "Sir, the Zalthar are not responding to any of our hails. We have tried every standard frequency, every diplomatic channel, everything in the database. They are moving into formation and heading directly toward New Montana. Estimated arrival time at the colony, 4 hours and 17 minutes. Marcus grabbed the ship-wide intercom with hands that were completely steady despite the fear coursing through him. All hands throughout the ship, this is the commander. We have Zalthar warships entering the system in hostile formation. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is absolutely not a drill. All personnel report to battle stations immediately. Seal all bulkheads. Prepare for combat operations. The Defiant came alive with frantic activity throughout every deck. Crew members rushed to their assigned posts. Systems that had been in standby mode were brought fully online, and the ship's meager weapons were charged and made ready. Marcus knew with absolute certainty that it would not be nearly enough. The Defiant had been built for patrol work and rescue operations, not frontline combat. Her shields were weak, designed to deflect micrometeors and radiation rather than military-grade weapons. Her guns were outdated, museum pieces compared to modern warship armament. Her armor was thin, just enough to protect against accidental impacts. She was a rescue boat being sent against a battleship. But she was all that stood between 12,000 innocent colonists and an alien armada bent on teaching humanity a lesson. Helen established an emergency channel to the colony surface. Captain Helen Morris appeared on the screen, her face tight with barely controlled fear but her voice remarkably steady. "Commander Bennett, we are beginning evacuations immediately, but we need time. We need as much time as you can possibly give us." "I will buy you every second I can," Marcus promised, meaning it with every fiber of his being. "Get the children and pregnant women on the first transports out. Move everyone else to the underground shelters we built. If we cannot stop the Zalthar, at least you will have some protection from orbital bombardment." Two other patrol ships, the Guardian and the Sentinel, had been conducting operations in nearby star systems. They arrived within the hour, their commanders sending urgent reports as they entered the system. Captain Daniel Harper of the Guardian was a grizzled veteran with 30 years of military service, a man who had seen more combat than most admirals. Captain Lisa Montgomery of the Sentinel was younger, only recently promoted to command, but she had earned her position through exceptional skill and unwavering determination. The three human ships formed a defensive line between New Montana and the approaching Zalthar fleet, 3 small vessels against 15 warships. "This is absolutely suicide," Lisa said over the secure command channel, her voice shaking slightly. "We are completely outgunned, massively outarmored, and outnumbered 5-1. Our weapons cannot even scratch their heavy cruisers. Their shields will absorb everything we can throw at them. We do not stand a chance in hell." "I know all of that, Lisa," Marcus replied, his voice calm despite the terror he felt. "But we are all those 12,000 people of standing between them and death. We hold this line as long as we possibly can. Every single minute we give them is another 100 lives saved, another family that gets to safety. That is worth dying for." Daniel's gruff voice cut through the channel. "Then let us make absolutely sure every minute counts. Let us make these bastards remember that they tangled with humans." The Zalthar fleet did not slow down. They did not attempt communication. They did not offer terms or demand surrender. They simply came on in perfect formation, a wall of metal and weapons designed for one single purpose: total destruction. When they were within maximum weapons range, Marcus gave the order he had hoped his entire career never to give. "All ships, open fire with everything you have." The 3 human vessels unleashed everything in their arsenals. Missiles streaked through the black void of space, energy beams lanced out in brilliant colors, and railgun rounds tore toward the enemy at incredible velocities. For one brief moment, Marcus allowed himself to hope. Maybe they could do some real damage. Maybe they could force the Zalthar to think twice about the cost of this attack. Then the Zalthar returned fire with casual, overwhelming force, and hope died screaming. The first coordinated barrage struck the Sentinel with devastating precision. Lisa's ship staggered violently under the incredible impact, her shields collapsing like tissue paper in a hurricane. The second barrage, fired less than 3 seconds later, tore completely through her hull, ripping the Sentinel apart from the inside. The ship exploded in a massive ball of white-hot fire and expanding debris that lit up the darkness of space. "No," Marcus shouted, his voice breaking. "Lisa," but there was nothing anyone could do. The Sentinel and her entire crew of 73 were simply gone. The Guardian lasted only slightly longer through sheer determination and skill. Daniel managed to maneuver his ship behind one of New Montana's 3 moons, using the satellite for cover and buying precious seconds. But the Zalthar were patient hunters. They surrounded the moon with methodical precision, cutting off all possible escape routes, and hammered the Guardian with sustained fire until she was nothing but a spreading cloud of wreckage. The Defiant was suddenly, terribly alone against 15 warships. Amy fired every working weapon the ship possessed with desperate determination, but it was like throwing pebbles at an armored tank. The Zalthar heavy cruiser locked its weapons on the Defiant, and Marcus knew with absolute certainty that his ship had only seconds left before being obliterated. "Helm, emergency evasive maneuvers now," he ordered with desperate urgency. The pilot, a young woman named Sarah Brooks who had joined them just a year ago, threw the Defiant into a wild series of maneuvers that would have torn apart a lesser vessel. She pushed the aging ship beyond every safety limitation, beyond every rated stress tolerance. Zalthar weapons fire passed so close that Marcus could actually see the energy beams on the main view screen, close enough to feel their heat through the hull. "Shields at 15% and falling fast," Gary reported from engineering, his voice strained. "We cannot possibly take another direct hit. If they connect even once, we are finished." Marcus made the hardest decision of his entire life in that moment. "Helm, get us down to the colony surface immediately. We are going to land and evacuate as many people as we can physically carry." "Sir, if we go down there, we will be completely trapped," Amy protested. "We will never get back into space." "We are dead anyway no matter what we do," Marcus said quietly, with absolute certainty. "At least this way we can save some of them. At least we can get a few thousand people out before the end." The Defiant dove toward New Montana's surface like a meteor, alarms blaring throughout every deck as the ship strained to make the descent in one piece. Behind them, the Zalthar fleet moved into perfect bombardment positions in orbit over the colony. And then, with no warning and no mercy, they opened fire on the defenseless surface below. Marcus watched in absolute horror as energy beams rained down from orbit like the wrath of angry gods. Farms that had taken years to build burned in seconds, buildings that represented the hopes of thousands collapsed into rubble, and the beautiful fields that had been so peaceful that morning turned into massive craters of fire and ash. The Zalthar were not trying to conquer. They were not trying to occupy. They were not even trying to steal resources. They were simply destroying everything that was human, erasing all trace of humanity's presence. "Get us down right now," Marcus roared, his voice raw. The Defiant hit the ground hard, her landing gear collapsing completely under the impact, her hull screaming in protest as metal bent and systems failed. But she held together through sheer stubborn determination. The cargo bay doors opened with a hydraulic hiss, and Marcus was already running, already shouting orders at the top of his lungs. "Everyone who can move, get to the ship immediately. Leave everything behind, just run for your lives." Colonists streamed toward the Defiant from all directions, their faces blackened with thick smoke, their eyes wide with absolute terror. Children cried for parents they could not find. Parents carried infants wrapped in whatever they could grab, and the elderly struggled desperately to keep up with younger people. Marcus and his crew pulled people aboard with their bare hands, packing them into every available space, no matter how small. Above them, the Zalthar bombardment continued without pause. Marcus saw a farmhouse explode into splinters, a school building collapse on screaming children, a medical center reduced to burning rubble in seconds. He saw people running for safety that did not exist, people falling as the ground shook beneath them, people dying. "How many do we have aboard?" he shouted to Helen over the chaos. 3,000 packed in like cargo," she called back, her voice hoarse from shouting. "The cargo holds are completely full, the corridors are full, we have people crowded into the engineering spaces. We physically cannot fit any more without crushing them." Marcus looked at the thousands of colonists still running toward the ship, still hoping desperately for salvation that he could not provide. His heart broke into pieces. "Seal the doors," he ordered, the words tearing him apart. "Gary, can we possibly fly this wreck?" The engineer appeared, his face covered in sweat and blood from a dozen small cuts. "Maybe, if we are very lucky, if the Zalthar do not shoot us down immediately. Then let us pray we are lucky," Marcus said. He turned to face the colonists who had not made it aboard, who stood watching with desperate, betrayed eyes. "Get to the underground shelters immediately. Go as deep as you can. Survive this. We will come back for you. I swear we will come back." He did not know if it was a lie or a promise he could never keep. The Defiant's battered engines roared to life with a sound like tortured metal, and the ship lurched unsteadily into the air. She was never designed to carry this many people, had never been tested at even half this weight, and every single system screamed in protest. But Sarah Brooks was the finest pilot Marcus had ever seen in his entire career, and she coaxed the dying ship up through the smoke-filled atmosphere with skill that bordered on miraculous. A Zalthar fighter swooped in from above, weapons locked directly on the Defiant. Amy fired the ship's last working cannon in one desperate shot, and by some miracle of chance or fate, the shot connected perfectly. The fighter spun away, trailing atmosphere and sparks, damaged but not destroyed. "Hyperspace jump is ready, coordinates locked for Earth," Peter reported, his voice shaking but determined. "Jump immediately," Marcus ordered. The Defiant vanished from New Montana in a flash of light, leaving behind 9,000 colonists who would not survive the next hour. Marcus stood on the bridge, surrounded by 3,000 people who had lost absolutely everything they owned, and felt the crushing weight of command and failure pressing down on him. They had failed. The Zalthar had attacked without warning, without mercy, without any regard for innocent life, and humanity had been completely powerless to stop them. When they finally arrived at Earth 3 days later after a desperate journey, Marcus delivered his full report to Admiral Patricia Green in her office overlooking the gleaming blue planet below. He told her everything about the attack, about the deaths, about the 2 ships and their crews he had watched die. He told her about the 3,000 colonists they had managed to save and the 9,000 they had been forced to leave behind to their fate. Patricia listened in complete silence, her face carved from stone, her eyes burning. When he finally finished his report, she stood slowly and walked to the wide window of her office, looking out at Earth turning peacefully below. Director Vincent Carter went back to the Zalthar one final time, she said quietly, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. He asked Ambassador Krell directly why they attacked New Montana without warning. "Do you want to know what that creature told him?" Marcus shook his head, not trusting his voice. "Krell said that humanity needed to learn its proper place in the galaxy, that we are a young species, primitive and weak, and that we must understand the consequences of defying our betters. He said the attack on New Montana was a lesson, an education in reality. He actually laughed when he said it." Patricia turned back to face Marcus, and in her eyes was something he had never seen before in all the years he had known her. Pure, burning rage. "They wanted to teach us a lesson," she said, each word sharp as a knife. "They wanted to show us that we are nothing, that we should crawl back to our little planet and never venture out into the galaxy again. They wanted us to be afraid." She walked to her desk and activated a communication channel with swift, angry movements. Within seconds, the faces of Earth's top military and political leaders appeared on multiple screens arranged around the office. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patricia said, her voice like ice, "the Zalthar Dominion has attacked a human colony without any provocation, killing 9,000 innocent civilians, including hundreds of children. They have stated publicly that this was a lesson to put us in our place, to teach us to fear them. I am formally requesting immediate authorization to mobilize Earth's entire combined fleet. We are going to war." Marcus watched as one by one, every single leader gave their approval. Some did so with clear reluctance, others with grim determination, but all of them understood that there was no other choice. Humanity could not survive in a galaxy where any powerful species could slaughter their people without consequence. The vote was completely unanimous. Earth went to war. Over the next 4 weeks, humanity mobilized like never before in its entire history. Every shipyard in the Sol system worked around the clock in continuous shifts, building new vessels from scratch and upgrading old ones that had been mothballed for decades. The combined fleet swelled from a peacetime force of 70 ships to an armada of 200 as everything that could fly and fight was pressed into service. Civilian ships were converted for military use. Mining vessels were fitted with weapons. Even some of the older exploration ships from the first days of human spaceflight were brought back and retrofitted. Marcus was given command of a brand new destroyer fresh from the orbital shipyards, a sleek warship called the Vengeance. It was significantly larger than the poor Defiant had been, far better armed with the latest weapons technology Earth could produce, and purpose built from the keel up for frontline combat. The name had been his choice, approved immediately by Admiral Green. Amy Rodriguez was promoted to lieutenant commander and became his executive officer, bringing with her the tactical brilliance that had helped them survive. Gary Fisher led the engineering department with the same dedication he had shown on the Defiant, and many of the surviving crew members from that desperate day volunteered to join him on the Vengeance. They trained relentlessly, running combat drills until the crew could respond to any threat in their sleep. They planned strategy sessions that stretched for hours, studying every scrap of intelligence about Zalthar tactics and technology. They prepared themselves mentally and physically for what everyone knew would be the fight of their lives. Admiral Patricia Green took personal command of the entire fleet, overseeing every aspect of the preparation with tireless energy. She was a woman completely transformed from the administrator Marcus had known before. The attack on New Montana had stripped away any softness, revealing the warrior that had always lurked beneath. She had steel in her spine and fire in her eyes, and every person under her command would have followed her into the depths of hell itself. Other nations and colonies across human space contributed ships and personnel to the effort. The loss of New Montana had unified humanity in a way that nothing else in history ever had. Political differences were set aside, old grudges were forgotten, and everyone focused on the single goal of making the Zalthar pay for what they had done. Every person who joined the military, who volunteered to crew the ships heading into battle, had the same thought burning in their mind. This could have been my home, my family, my world. Intelligence reports came in regularly from Agent Samantha Brooks, a deep-cover operative who had somehow managed to infiltrate Zalthar communication networks through methods she refused to explain even to Admiral Green. Her reports painted a picture of an enemy that was confident to the point of arrogance. The Dominion leadership believed absolutely that humanity would collapse at the first sign of real military resistance, just like the other 47 species they had conquered before. They were already discussing how to divide up human territory, which Zalthar noble houses would be given which former human worlds as rewards. The Zalthar did not understand humans at all. They had made a fatal mistake in their calculations. They thought destroying one colony would break humanity's will to resist. Instead, they had given humanity something it had not had in generations, a common enemy and a unified purpose. Colonel Andrew Morrison, a brilliant strategic genius who had studied every major conflict in human history from ancient times to the present day, developed the comprehensive battle plan. It was risky, completely unconventional, and relied entirely on the one significant advantage humanity possessed over the technologically superior Zalthar: pure adaptability and creative thinking. The Zalthar fought according to rigid military doctrine that had been refined over 2 centuries of conquest. They followed the same proven tactics that had won them an empire spanning hundreds of worlds. Their ships were incredibly powerful. Their technology was generations advanced beyond most other species, but they were utterly predictable in how they used those advantages. They had become overconfident, lazy in their dominance. Humans, by contrast, were not predictable at all. Humanity had spent its entire history fighting wars against itself, developing tactics and counter-tactics in an endless cycle of innovation. Humans were survivors, adapters, creatures who could look at any situation and find a way to turn it to their advantage. As the massive fleet assembled in formation near Jupiter's orbit, the ships hanging in space like a constellation of deadly stars, Marcus stood on the bridge of the Vengeance and looked at the 200 vessels gathered for war. They were not the most powerful fleet in the galaxy by any measure. Their technology was not the most advanced. Many of the ships were old, patched together from spare parts and determination, but they were crewed by men and women who had seen exactly what the Zalthar were capable of doing and had chosen to fight anyway, to stand up and say no. Patricia's voice came over the fleet-wide channel, broadcast to every ship simultaneously. Her words carried to tens of thousands of personnel preparing for battle. All ships, this is Admiral Green. In less than 1 hour, we will make the jump to Zalthar space and engage their military forces directly. I know that many of you are wondering why we are doing this, why we are risking everything for a war that we did not start, that we did not want. She paused for a long moment, and Marcus could imagine her standing on the bridge of her massive flagship, the Washington, looking at her crew with the same fierce determination she had shown when declaring war. We fight because 9,000 of our people were murdered without any cause or warning. We fight because the Zalthar believe we are weak, that we will submit to their will out of simple fear. We fight because humanity has never bowed to tyrants and bullies in all of our long history, and we absolutely will not start now. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as her words echoed through the bridge. The Zalthar wanted to teach us a lesson about our place in the galaxy, Patricia continued, her voice rising with passion. They wanted us to learn to be afraid of them, to crawl back to Earth and never dare to venture out again. Well, we are about to teach them a lesson of our own. We are about to show them what happens when you attack innocent people. We are about to demonstrate what happens when you declare war on humanity. The fleet jumped to hyperspace as one, 200 ships vanishing in flashes of light, and the war truly began. Marcus stood at his post, his hands steady on the controls, his mind focused on the battle ahead. He thought of the 9,000 colonists who had died on New Montana. He thought of Lisa Montgomery and Daniel Harper, brave commanders who had given their lives buying time for others. He thought of every human who had ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of a better future. The Zalthar had made a terrible mistake. They had awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping, something that every bully and tyrant in human history had eventually discovered to their regret. They had picked a fight with a species that simply did not know how to quit, that would rather die fighting than live in submission. As the Vengeance emerged from hyperspace in Zalthar territory, Marcus allowed himself a cold smile. The Dominion was about to learn a very hard lesson. They should have left the humans alone. Now they would face the consequences of their arrogance, and Marcus would make absolutely certain they never forgot it. The hyperspace jump lasted exactly 43 minutes, but for Marcus Bennett, it felt like an eternity. He stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace through the viewscreen, his mind racing through every possible outcome of what was about to happen. Behind him, his crew worked in tense silence, each person focused on their duties, each one knowing that they were about to face an enemy that had never lost a major battle in 200 years of conquest. Amy Rodriguez sat at her tactical station, her fingers moving across the controls with practiced precision as she ran final checks on every weapon system. Gary Fisher was down in engineering, making last-minute adjustments to the engines and shields, squeezing out every bit of performance the ship could give. Throughout the Vengeance, and throughout the entire fleet of 200 ships, tens of thousands of men and women prepared themselves for what might be their last day alive. When we drop out of hyperspace, we are going to be right in the middle of their territory, Amy said quietly, not looking away from her screens. Intelligence says there are 3 major military installations in this system. Each one is defended by at least 20 warships, probably more. We are going to be outnumbered from the very first second. Marcus nodded slowly. That is exactly what Colonel Morrison wants. The Zalthar expect us to be cautious, to probe their defenses carefully, to retreat at the first sign of serious resistance. Instead, we are going to hit them hard and fast before they even know we are there. We are going to show them that humans do not play by their rules. The countdown timer on the main display ticked down towards 0. Marcus took a deep breath, straightened his uniform, and opened a channel to the entire ship. All hands, this is the commander. We are about to engage the enemy. Remember your training, trust your shipmates, and remember what we are fighting for. We are fighting for the 9,000 people who died on New Montana. We are fighting for every human colony that the Zalthar threatened. We are fighting to show the entire galaxy that humanity will not be pushed around. Today, we teach the Zalthar a lesson they will never forget. The timer hit 0, and the Vengeance dropped out of hyperspace into normal space. The transition was violent, the ship shuddering as it crossed the dimensional barrier. Marcus gripped his command chair as the main view screen flickered and then cleared, showing them exactly where they were. They had emerged in the Kepler 442 system, deep in Zalthar space, exactly where Colonel Morrison had planned. The star system was home to one of the Dominion's major fortress stations, a massive military installation that served as a command center for an entire sector. Around the fortress, Marcus could see warships, dozens of them, hanging in space like predators guarding their territory. And all around the Vengeance, flickering into existence one after another, were the ships of Earth's fleet. 200 human vessels appeared in the heart of enemy territory, weapons already charging, shields already at maximum power. Multiple contacts, Amy called out, her voice sharp and focused. I count 63 Zalthar warships in this system, including the fortress station. They are beginning to react, moving to intercept positions. They look surprised, sir. I do not think they expected us to come to them. They thought we would be too afraid, Marcus said with a cold smile. They thought we would defend our colonies and wait for them to pick us apart one at a time. They were wrong. All weapons, target the fortress station. Fire when ready. The Vengeance and a dozen other ships in her squadron opened fire simultaneously, unleashing a devastating barrage of missiles, energy beams, and railgun rounds at the massive fortress. The Zalthar shields flared bright blue as they absorbed the impacts, but the humans kept firing, kept hammering at the same spot, concentrating their fire with precision. Across the system, the entire human fleet spread out in the complex attack pattern that Colonel Morrison had designed. They were not fighting like the Zalthar expected. They were not engaging in the traditional ship-to-ship combat that had won the Dominion 47 wars. Instead, they were moving in small squadrons, hitting targets of opportunity, using asteroids and the system's 2 gas giants for cover, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. The Zalthar warships moved to engage, but they were confused, uncertain. Their doctrine called for massive formations, for overwhelming firepower applied to a single point. But the human ships refused to stay in one place, refused to give them a clear target. It was like trying to fight smoke. Enemy cruiser moving to intercept us, Amy reported. Heavy class coming in fast on our port side. Marcus watched the tactical display as the Zalthar ship closed the distance. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of the Vengeance, bristling with weapons. In a straight fight, the human destroyer would not stand a chance, but Marcus had no intention of fighting straight. Helm, dive toward that asteroid cluster at full speed, he ordered. Weapons, prepare torpedo spread pattern Delta. We are going to use their size against them. Sarah Brooks, who had survived New Montana and insisted on flying the Vengeance, sent the ship diving toward a field of tumbling rocks. The Zalthar cruiser followed, its commander confident in his ship's superiority. But as the Vengeance weaved through the asteroids with incredible precision, the much larger cruiser struggled to maneuver. It was like watching a whale chase a dolphin. Now, Marcus ordered calmly. The Vengeance spun in space, a maneuver that should have been impossible for a ship her size, and fired a full spread of torpedoes directly into the Zalthar cruiser's path. The enemy ship tried to evade, but it was too big, too slow. The torpedoes impacted directly against its forward shields, and in that moment of distraction, 3 other human ships appeared from behind different asteroids and opened fire from multiple angles. The Zalthar cruiser's shields collapsed under the coordinated assault and railgun rounds tore into its hull. The great ship shuddered, atmosphere venting from dozens of breaches, and then its reactor went critical. The explosion lit up the asteroid field like a second sun. "One down," Amy said with fierce satisfaction. "But we have got more coming. Lots more." The battle raged across the entire star system for hours. Human ships darted in and out, striking fast and retreating before the Zalthar could bring their superior firepower to bear. They used every trick, every unorthodox tactic they could think of. They hid in the shadow of planets, they used debris fields for cover, they even flew through the outer atmosphere of the gas giant, skimming through clouds of hydrogen at dangerous speeds to lose pursuit. The Zalthar fought back with savage determination, but they were struggling to adapt. Their commanders kept trying to force the humans into a conventional battle, kept trying to get them to stand still and fight properly. But the humans refused. They were like guerrilla fighters in space, never where the enemy expected, always hitting from unexpected angles. "Captain Marcus Bennett, this is Admiral Green," Patricia's voice came through on the command channel. "The fortress station is heavily damaged but still operational. I need you to take your squadron and finish it. The rest of the fleet will keep the warships busy." "Understood, Admiral. All ships in Squadron 7 follow my lead. We are going after the fortress." Marcus led his squadron of 12 ships in a high-speed run toward the massive station. It was a terrifying target, bristling with hundreds of weapons, its shields still glowing with power. But Marcus had noticed something during the battle. The fortress was designed to fight fleets, to engage multiple targets at long range. Its defensive systems were not optimized for close-range combat. "We are going right down their throat," he announced to his squadron. "Full speed, maximum shields forward, and do not slow down no matter what happens. When we get close, target the shield generators. If we can knock those out, the station is defenseless." The 12 human ships accelerated toward the fortress in a tight formation, presenting the smallest possible target. The station's weapons opened fire, filling space with energy beams and explosive rounds. 2 human ships took direct hits, their shields failing, their hulls breached. Marcus watched in horror as the destroyer Liberty spun out of control, her crew lost. But the remaining 10 ships kept going, kept accelerating, kept pushing forward. "We are inside their optimal firing range," Amy reported. "Shields at 40% and dropping. We are taking a beating, sir." "Almost there," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "Hold together just a little longer." The human ships roared past the fortress's outer defensive perimeter, so close that Marcus could see the details of its hull plating on the view screen. At this range, the station's massive weapons could not track them effectively. They were too close, moving too fast. "Now, fire everything." The 10 surviving ships unleashed every weapon they had at point-blank range, targeting the exposed shield generators that dotted the fortress's surface. Explosions blossomed across the station's hull as one generator after another was destroyed. The fortress's shields flickered, weakened, and then collapsed completely. "Shields are down on the fortress," Amy shouted triumphantly. "It is exposed. All ships in the fleet, this is Admiral Green. The fortress is vulnerable. Concentrate all fire. Destroy it now." From across the star system, from every human ship that had a clear line of fire, weapons fire converged on the now defenseless fortress. Missiles streaked through space, energy beams lanced across the void, and railgun rounds hammered into the station's bare hull. The fortress tried to return fire, but without shields it was helpless. The station's reactor complex was hit by a lucky shot from a human cruiser. The explosion was spectacular, a chain reaction that tore through the entire massive structure. For a moment, the fortress was brighter than the star it orbited, and then it was simply gone, reduced to expanding debris and fading energy. The Zalthar warships that remained in the system saw their command center destroyed and did what they had never done before in their entire military history. They retreated. The proud ships of the Dominion, which had conquered 47 species, turned and fled from human forces. "Do we pursue, Admiral?" Marcus asked over the fleet channel, watching the enemy ships jump to hyperspace. Negative, Patricia replied. We have accomplished our objective here. Begin recovery operations for any survivors, then we move to the next target. We have 2 more installations to hit before the Zalthar can properly respond. The human fleet had won its first major victory, but the cost had been significant. Marcus looked at the casualty reports coming in and felt his stomach turn. 17 ships lost, nearly 3,000 crew members dead or missing. But they had destroyed or disabled more than 40 Zalthar warships and eliminated a major military installation. By any measure, it was a stunning success. Over the next 2 weeks, the human fleet struck 2 more Zalthar installations in lightning raids. Each time, they used the same tactics that had worked at Kepler 442. They appeared without warning, struck hard and fast, and disappeared before the enemy could organize an effective response. The Zalthar military commanders were bewildered, frustrated, and increasingly desperate. Intelligence reports from Agent Samantha Brooks revealed that the Dominion leadership was in chaos. They had sent their fleets to crush what they thought would be easy resistance, only to have those fleets decimated by an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. The Zalthar High Command was arguing among themselves, each faction blaming others for the disaster, none of them able to understand how humans were winning. But Marcus knew the truth. Humans were not winning because they had better technology or more powerful ships. They were winning because they were willing to adapt, to innovate, to throw out the rulebook and fight in ways the enemy never expected. The Zalthar had spent 2 centuries conquering species that fought the way they expected. Humanity was different. 6 months into the war, Admiral Green called a meeting of all ship commanders at a secure location in deep space. Marcus took a shuttle over to the Washington and found himself in a briefing room with 200 other captains, all of them showing the strain of continuous combat. Patricia stood at the front of the room, her uniform crisp but her face showing the exhaustion of command. Behind her was a massive star chart showing Zalthar space. Ladies and gentlemen, we have accomplished something remarkable in the past 6 months. We have destroyed or captured more than 200 enemy warships. We have eliminated 7 major military installations. We have liberated 4 worlds that the Zalthar had conquered from other species. But the war is not over. The Zalthar still have a massive fleet, and they are finally beginning to adapt to our tactics. She pressed a control, and the star chart zoomed in on one particular system. This is the Zalthar home system, their capital world, their government, their military headquarters. Colonel Morrison and I have developed a plan for an assault on the system itself. If we can strike at the heart of the Dominion, we can force them to surrender. A murmur ran through the assembled captains. Attacking the Zalthar home system was audacious to the point of insanity. It would be defended by hundreds of ships, by orbital defense platforms, by every weapon the Dominion could bring to bear. I know what you are all thinking, Patricia continued. This is dangerous. This is risky. Many of us will not come back, but this is also our chance to end the war decisively. The Zalthar need to learn that they cannot attack humanity without consequences. They need to learn that we will go anywhere, do anything to protect our people. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. It was a bold plan, maybe too bold, but he also knew that Patricia was right. The only way to truly defeat an empire like the Zalthar was to strike at its heart. Over the next month, the fleet prepared for the largest operation of the war. Every ship was brought to peak condition, every system checked and rechecked. Additional forces arrived from Earth, bringing the fleet's strength up to nearly 300 ships. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. New technology was also being deployed, fruits of the crash research program that had been running since the war began. Dr. Elizabeth Stone, a brilliant physicist, had developed a shield harmonic system that could disrupt Zalthar weapons. It was not perfect, but it gave human ships a fighting chance against the enemy's superior firepower. Marcus spent his time training with his crew, running simulations of the upcoming battle, and trying not to think too much about the odds they faced. Amy had calculated that they would be outnumbered at least 2 to 1, possibly worse. But they had surprise on their side, and they had tactics the Zalthar had proven unable to counter effectively. The night before the attack, Marcus found himself unable to sleep. He walked through the quiet corridors of the Vengeance, checking on crew members, offering words of encouragement. He found Gary in engineering, as always, working on the engines. "Cannot sleep either?" Gary asked, looking up from a power coupling he was adjusting. "Too much on my mind," Marcus admitted. "Tomorrow we are going to take the fight directly to their home. It seems almost impossible." Gary wiped his hands on a rag and looked at Marcus seriously. 6 months ago, it seemed impossible that we would even survive the first battle, but we did. We survived because we are stubborn, we are clever, and we refuse to give up. The Zalthar are about to learn that the hard way." Marcus smiled. "When did you become a philosopher?" "When I started keeping this old ship running on spare parts and determination," Gary replied with a grin. "Now get some rest, sir. Tomorrow we make history." The fleet jumped to the Zalthar home system at dawn ship time. 300 human vessels appeared in the heart of the Dominion, weapons ready, shields at maximum. And waiting for them was the largest concentration of military force the galaxy had seen in centuries. The Zalthar had pulled back nearly their entire fleet to defend the home system. Marcus counted over 600 warships arrayed in defensive formations around the capital world, plus dozens of orbital defense platforms, plus countless smaller vessels. It was an overwhelming force designed to crush any attacker. "All ships, this is Admiral Green. You see what we face. You see the odds, but remember this, we have come through fire and battle to reach this moment. We have proven that humans do not surrender, that humans do not run, that humans will fight for what is right no matter the cost. Today, we end this war. Today, we show the Zalthar and the entire galaxy what humanity is capable of." Attack! The human fleet surged forward in a massive wave, and the battle for the Zalthar home system began. It was unlike anything Marcus had experienced in the previous 6 months. This was not a hit-and-run raid. This was a full-scale engagement, 2 fleets clashing with everything they had. The space around the capital world became a nightmare of weapons fire, exploding ships, and desperate maneuvers. Human vessels used every trick they had learned, but the Zalthar had also learned. They had adapted their formations, had developed new tactics to counter human mobility. The battle was brutal, vicious, and neither side gave any quarter. Marcus commanded the Vengeance through the chaos, his voice calm even as death flew past on all sides. He saw human ships die, saw brave crews sacrifice themselves to take out enemy vessels. He saw acts of heroism that would be remembered for generations. The destroyer Courage rammed a Zalthar battleship rather than let it fire on a crippled human carrier. The cruiser Defiance, named after Marcus's old ship, held position against 5 enemy vessels, giving time for damaged ships to retreat. The battle raged for 3 full days without pause. Crews pushed themselves beyond exhaustion, running on stimulants and sheer determination. Ships were repaired in the middle of combat, damaged vessels were patched up and thrown back into the fight. The Zalthar fought with equal desperation, knowing that if their capital fell, their empire was finished. On the second day, a breakthrough came. A squadron of human ships managed to punch through the orbital defenses and began targeting ground installations on the capital world itself. The Zalthar, who had never had their home world attacked, panicked. They pulled ships away from the main battle to defend their planet, weakening their formation. Patricia saw the opening and struck with devastating precision. She concentrated the entire human fleet on one section of the Zalthar line, overwhelming it with focused fire. The enemy formation broke, ships scattering as the humans poured through the gap. Within hours, human vessels had achieved orbital superiority over large sections of the capital world. On the third day, with human ships dominating the space around their capital and threatening to bombard the surface, the Zalthar leadership finally admitted what they had never admitted before. They had been defeated. Ambassador Krell himself appeared on all communication channels, his voice hollow. "You request terms of surrender," he said simply. The fighting stopped as if someone had flipped a switch. Human and Zalthar ships drifted in space, exhausted, battered, but the guns fell silent. Patricia herself handled the negotiations, and she was not gentle. The terms were harsh and deliberate. The Zalthar Dominion would pay massive reparations to humanity for the attack on New Montana. They would return all territories they had conquered in the past 50 years, giving freedom back to a dozen species. Their military would be limited in size and capability, prevented from launching wars of conquest. And most importantly, they would formally recognize humanity as a sovereign power deserving of respect and equal standing. The Zalthar leadership had no choice but to accept. Their fleet was shattered, their capital was at the mercy of human weapons, and their people were demanding peace. The mighty dominion that had conquered 47 species bent its knee to the humans they had dismissed as primitive. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Vengeance 3 days after the surrender, watching as the human fleet began to withdraw from Zalthar space. The cost had been staggering. Nearly 100 human ships lost, tens of thousands of crew members dead. But they had won. Against all odds, against an empire that had seemed invincible, humanity had won. A communication came through from Admiral Green. All ship commanders, report to the Washington for a final briefing before we return to Earth. In the great hangar bay of the flagship, Patricia stood before the assembled commanders one last time. She looked older now, worn down by the weight of command and the cost of victory. But there was also pride in her eyes. "You all know what we accomplished here," she began. "We went to war against an empire that had never lost, against an enemy that thought we were beneath their notice. They attacked New Montana thinking it would be a simple lesson, a way to put us in our place. Instead, they learned a lesson they will never forget." She paused, her voice becoming quieter but more intense. "The galaxy now knows that humanity cannot be bullied. They know that if you attack our people, we will find you, we will fight you, and we will not stop until justice is done. The Zalthar wanted to teach us to be afraid. Instead, we taught them to respect us." Patricia looked at each commander in turn. "We are going home now. We are going home to Earth, to our families, to the lives we left behind. But we are not the same people who left 6 months ago. We are warriors now. We are survivors. And we are proof that humanity has a place among the stars, a place we earned with blood and courage." The commanders stood in silence, each one processing what they had been through, what they had lost, what they had gained. Marcus thought about the 9,000 colonists who had died on New Montana, thought about the thousands of crew members who had died in the war. They had paid a terrible price. But their sacrifice had not been in vain. 2 weeks later, the fleet returned to Earth. As the ships entered orbit around the blue planet, Marcus looked down at his home world and felt emotions he could not quite name. Joy, relief, sadness, pride, all mixed together into something too big for words. The governments of Earth declared a day of remembrance for all those who had died in the war. Memorials were built, names were carved in stone, stories were told and retold. But there was also celebration, because humanity had proven something important. They had proven that they belonged in the galaxy, that they would not be pushed around or intimidated. Marcus attended the memorial ceremony at New Montana, or what was left of it. The colony had been rebuilt over the past 6 months by survivors who had hidden in the underground shelters. They had come out after the Zalthar left and had immediately begun the hard work of rebuilding. The farms were starting to grow again, new buildings were rising from the ruins, and children played in the streets that had been bombed to rubble. Captain Helen Morris, who had survived in the shelters with 3,000 others, greeted Marcus as he stepped off the shuttle. She looked older, scarred by what she had endured, but her eyes were bright. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for keeping your promise. You said you would come back, and you did." Marcus shook his head. "We all came back. Every human who fought in this war fought for New Montana, fought for you. We could not save everyone, but we made sure that those who died were not forgotten." The memorial was a simple stone wall with 9,000 names carved into it. Marcus walked along the wall, reading the names, remembering. These were the people they had failed to save, the people whose deaths had started a war. But their deaths had also united humanity, had given every human a reason to stand up and fight. Admiral Patricia Green gave the main speech at the ceremony. She spoke about loss and sacrifice, about courage and determination, about the price of freedom and the cost of justice. But she also spoke about hope, about the future, about the fact that humanity had earned its place among the stars. The Zalthar thought they could teach us a lesson, Patricia said, her voice carrying across the crowd. They thought they could make us afraid, make us small, make us crawl back to Earth and give up our dreams of the stars. But they were wrong. They were so very wrong, because humanity does not give up. Humanity does not surrender, and humanity never forgets. She gestured to the memorial wall. These 9,000 people died, but their deaths had meaning. They united us. They showed us what we could become when we stand together. The Zalthar wanted to teach us a lesson, and they did. They taught us that we are stronger than we knew. They taught us that we will fight for each other. They taught us that humanity has a place in this galaxy, and that place is anywhere we choose to be. Marcus stood with his crew from the Vengeance, with Amy and Gary and Sarah and all the others who had survived. They had been through hell together, had faced death together, and had come out the other side. They were family now, bound by something deeper than blood. Later that evening, as the sun set over New Montana, Marcus found a quiet spot overlooking the valley. The rebuilt farm stretched out before him, golden in the fading light. It looked peaceful again. It looked like home. Amy found him there, standing in silence. "What are you thinking about, sir?" she asked quietly. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I am thinking about how close we came to losing everything. If the Zalthar had hit Earth instead of New Montana, if they had been more ruthless, if they had understood us better, we might have lost. We got lucky in a lot of ways." Amy shook her head. "It was not luck, sir. It was determination. It was courage. It was people like you who refused to give up even when the odds were impossible. The Zalthar thought we were weak because we had not built an empire like theirs. They did not understand that we were strong for different reasons. We were strong because we cared about each other, because we fought for something bigger than ourselves." Marcus smiled. "When did you become a philosopher?" Amy laughed. "I learned from the best." "Now come on, the celebration is starting down in the main square. The colonists want to thank the people who saved them." As they walked back toward the settlement, Marcus thought about the future. The war was over, but the galaxy had changed. Humanity had announced itself as a power to be respected. Other species that the Zalthar had oppressed were already reaching out to Earth, seeking alliances, asking for help in rebuilding. The galaxy suddenly seemed smaller and more connected. The party in the town square was loud and joyful. Colonists and military personnel mixed together, sharing stories, sharing drinks, celebrating survival. Marcus found himself pulled into conversation after conversation, each colonist wanting to thank him personally for what he had done. Gary appeared at his elbow with 2 drinks. "You look like you need this, sir." Marcus took the drink gratefully. "How are you holding up, Gary?" The engineer shrugged, tired, relieved, glad to be alive. "The Vengeance is going to need a complete overhaul after what we put her through. But she held together when we needed her to. I'm proud of that ship." "You should be," Marcus said. "You kept her flying when she should have fallen apart. You saved a lot of lives." "We all did," Gary replied. "That is what we do. That is what humans do. We save each other." As the party continued into the night, Marcus found himself thinking about Ambassador Krell, wondering what the Zalthar was thinking now. The arrogant creature who had dismissed humanity as primitive was now forced to watch as human influence spread across the galaxy, as the empire he served became a shadow of its former self. The Zalthar had made a fatal mistake. They had judged humanity by their standards, by their definitions of strength and power. They had seen a species without a vast empire and assumed weakness. They had seen a species that preferred peace and assumed cowardice. They had not understood that humanity's strength came from different places, from the bonds between people, from the willingness to stand up for what was right even when the cost was high. They should have left the humans alone. That was the lesson the entire galaxy was learning now. Humanity asked for nothing more than to be left in peace, to explore the stars and build new homes. But if you attacked humans, if you threatened their families, if you killed their people without cause, then you faced something terrifying. You faced a species that would not stop, would not quit, would not rest until justice was done. Marcus raised his drink in a silent toast to the 9,000 names on the memorial wall, to the crew members who had died in battle, to everyone who had sacrificed so that humanity could stand proud among the stars. They had paid the price for victory, and Marcus would make sure their sacrifice meant something. The galaxy was watching now. They had seen what humans could do when pushed to war. And the message was clear to every species, every empire, every power that might think about threatening humanity in the future. You should have left the humans alone. Now you know why. 3 months after the war ended, Marcus received new orders from Earth Command. He was being promoted to admiral and given command of a new initiative called the Frontier Defense Force. It was a fleet specifically designed to protect human colonies and assist other species who were rebuilding after Zalthar occupation. The role came with significant responsibility, but Marcus accepted it without hesitation. He had learned during the war that sometimes the only way to maintain peace was to be strong enough that no one dared threaten it. Amy was promoted to captain and given command of the Vengeance. Marcus could not think of anyone more deserving. She had proven herself in battle after battle, had made split-second decisions that saved countless lives, and had the respect of every officer and crew member who served with her. Gary remained as her chief engineer, refusing several offers of promotion because he said he belonged on the Vengeance, and besides, no one else could keep that temperamental ship running properly. The diplomatic landscape of the galaxy had shifted dramatically in the wake of humanity's victory. Species that had been afraid to oppose the Zalthar were suddenly willing to speak up, to assert their own independence. The Dominion's empire fractured as world after world declared independence or sought protection from other powers. Within a year of the war's end, the territory the Zalthar controlled had shrunk to less than a quarter of what it had been at its height. Earth became the center of a new coalition called the Free Worlds Alliance. It was not an empire built on conquest, but a voluntary association of species who believed in mutual defense and cooperation. The alliance grew quickly as more species joined, drawn by humanity's reputation for keeping their word and standing by their allies. Marcus found it ironic that humanity had gained more influence through defending others than the Zalthar had ever achieved through conquest. Ambassador Krell was recalled to the Zalthar home world in disgrace. The being who had so arrogantly dismissed humanity as primitive was now blamed for starting a war that had destroyed the Dominion's power. Marcus learned through intelligence channels that Krell had been stripped of rank and title, reduced to a minor functionary processing cargo manifests at a remote outpost. It was a fitting end for someone who had thought himself so superior. The rebuilt New Montana thrived in the years following the war. The colony became a symbol of human resilience, a place where people came to remember what had been lost and to celebrate what had been saved. Tourism became a major industry as people from across human space came to see the memorial wall, to walk the fields where the battle had been fought, to stand where Marcus and his crew had made their desperate last stand. The colonists welcomed the visitors, seeing it as a way to make sure the sacrifice was never forgotten. Captain Helen Morris became the colony's permanent administrator and worked tirelessly to make New Montana not just a memorial but a living, growing community. She established educational programs about the war, not to glorify violence, but to teach future generations about the cost of peace and the responsibility that came with strength. Students from across human space came to study at the New Montana Institute for Interstellar Relations, learning diplomacy and conflict resolution in the shadow of a war that could have been prevented. Dr. Kenneth Hayes, who had survived the initial attack by being away on a research expedition, returned to New Montana and continued his work. The glowing moss he had been studying that night before the attack turned out to have remarkable medical properties, just as he had suspected. It became the basis for a new treatment for radiation exposure, saving thousands of lives across multiple species. Kenneth always said it was fitting that something beautiful came from the place where so much had been destroyed. Sarah Brooks, the pilot who had saved the Defiant and later flew the Vengeance through impossible situations, became an instructor at Earth's Naval Academy. She trained a new generation of pilots, teaching them not just how to fly but how to think creatively, how to see opportunities where others saw only obstacles. Her students called her the Ghost because of her ability to make a ship disappear and reappear where the enemy least expected. Agent Samantha Brooks, no relation to Sarah despite the shared name, continued her intelligence work but in a different capacity. She became the head of the new Interspecies Intelligence Agency, coordinating information sharing between alliance members. Her work during the war had proven the value of knowing your enemy, and she made sure that humanity and its allies would never again be caught off guard the way they had been at New Montana. Colonel Andrew Morrison, the strategic genius who had designed the tactics that won the war, retired from active service and wrote extensively about military theory. His books became required reading at military academies across a dozen species. He argued passionately that the best way to win a war was to never fight it in the first place. But if you had to fight, you had to be willing to do whatever it took to protect those who could not protect themselves. Dr. Elizabeth Stone received numerous awards for her shield harmonic technology. She used her newfound fame to establish research institutes focused on defensive technologies. She believed that if species focused on protecting themselves rather than threatening others, the galaxy would be a more peaceful place. Her institutes became centers of innovation, developing technologies that saved lives rather than taking them. Admiral Patricia Green served as commander of Earth's combined fleet for another 10 years before retiring. She spent her retirement years writing a comprehensive history of the war, determined that future generations would understand not just what happened, but why it happened. Her book became one of the most widely read works in human space, a sobering reminder of how quickly peace could turn to war and how important it was to value life above pride. Marcus visited New Montana at least once a year for the memorial ceremony. He never missed it, no matter where his duties took him. He felt he owed it to the 9,000 people whose names were on that wall to stand there and remember them, to make sure their deaths continued to mean something. Each year, more survivors came to the ceremony, bringing their children and grandchildren, telling stories about loved ones who had been lost. On the 10th anniversary of the attack, Marcus stood before the memorial wall with hundreds of others. He was older now, his hair showing gray, his face marked by the years of command. But his voice was still strong as he spoke to the assembled crowd. 10 years ago, this place was attacked by an enemy who thought we were weak, who thought we would submit out of fear. They killed 9,000 people thinking it would teach us our place, but they were wrong, so very wrong. Those 9,000 people did not die in vain. Their deaths showed us who we really are. They showed us that humanity will stand together when threatened. They showed us that we will fight for what is right, no matter the cost. He paused, looking at the names carved in stone. We remember them not just as victims, but as the foundation of everything we built since. Because of them, we found the courage to fight back. Because of them, we united as a species in a way we never had before. Because of them, we earned our place among the stars. They paid the price for our freedom, and we will never forget that debt. After the ceremony, a young girl approached Marcus. She could not have been more than 7 years old, holding her mother's hand tightly. "My grandmother's name is on the wall," she said in a small voice. "I never met her, but my mother tells me stories." Marcus knelt down to the girl's level. "What was your grandmother's name?" "Margaret Sullivan," the girl said. "She was a teacher. My mother says she loved children and wanted to make the colony a good place to grow up." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I remember your grandmother. She helped us load children onto the Defiant. She made sure every child got on board safely before she would even think about saving herself. She was very brave." The girl's eyes widened. "You knew her?" "I did," Marcus said gently. "And she would be very proud of you and your mother. She would be happy to know that the colony she loved survived and grew." The girl hugged him suddenly, and Marcus found himself blinking back tears. This was why they had fought. Not for glory or power, but for moments like this, for children who could grow up in peace, for a future where the sacrifices of the past meant something. As Marcus prepared to leave New Montana and return to his duties, he took one last look at the valley. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the farms and buildings. It looked exactly as it had that morning 10 years ago when the Zalthar had arrived, peaceful, beautiful, like home. But Marcus knew that peace was not free. It had to be earned, defended, and sometimes fought for. The galaxy had learned that lesson when they learned what happens when you threaten humanity. They had learned that behind the peaceful exterior was a species that would do anything to protect their own. The Zalthar had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about power and dominance. Instead, they had taught the entire galaxy a different lesson. That true strength comes not from the ability to conquer, but from the willingness to stand up for what is right. That the most dangerous enemy is not the one who wants to fight, but the one who fights only when there is no other choice. That humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology or their tactics, but their refusal to accept injustice. As Marcus's shuttle lifted off from New Montana, he looked down at the memorial one last time. 9,000 names, 9,000 reasons why the war had been necessary, 9,000 reminders that freedom and peace required eternal vigilance. The galaxy was safer now, but Marcus knew that complacency was dangerous. There would always be another Zalthar, another empire that thought might made right, another bully that needed to be taught respect. But now the galaxy knew. Now every species understood. If you valued peace, if you wanted to build and grow and thrive, then humanity was the best friend you could have. But if you chose violence, if you threatened innocent people, if you declared war on humanity and their allies, then you would face something unstoppable. The message had been carved not just in stone on New Montana, but in the wreckage of Zalthar warships, in the ruins of their military installations, in the surrendered pride of an empire that thought itself invincible. The message was simple and clear to all who would listen. You should have left the humans alone. Now the entire galaxy knows why.